Jennifer Mary Hebert was adopted just before Thanksgiving in 1971. Throughout life, she was described as a caring individual who loved animals. In 2018, 48-year-old Jennifer was living with her fiancé, Wilford Chasen, who goes by Joe, at the Twin Leaf condominiums in Jacksonville, Florida. Chasen was a registered sex offender and often verbally abused Jennifer and her mother, Diane. It got so bad in the home that Jennifer and Diane became so afraid they wouldn't even communicate with each other. On October 15, 2018, OnStar received a call from Chasen, who said he was driving in his vehicle and wanted to take his own life. He let the operator know he had already cut himself with a razor and that he was driving on I-95. When officers got close to him, a chase ensued until OnStar was able to remotely disable the vehicle. The car came to a stop at a way station exit after running over a stop stick. At the scene, a deputy found a bloody diamond engagement ring after it had fallen out of the vehicle and onto the ground next to the driver's side. The deputy had no clue who it belonged to, but decided to book it into evidence. Once Chasen was in custody, he was found with self-inflicted lacerations to his arms, neck, and other parts of his body and taken to the hospital. While there, he shocked staff when he confessed to killing Jennifer and told them her body could be found at their apartment. However, he wouldn't share a motive behind her murder. Once he was discharged from the hospital and taken to the police station, he confessed once more. Authorities rushed to their apartment and sadly found Jennifer dead inside. It was now clear who the bloody diamond engagement ring belonged to. Before murdering Jennifer, he had been convicted of robbery, attempted kidnapping, and lewd and lascivious behavior with a child younger than 16. In the end, he was found guilty of murdering her and sentenced to 50 years in prison. On November 5, 1980, a mowing crew working in the median of Interstate 95 in Daytona Beach, Florida, found the skeletal remains of a woman. It was estimated that she died sometime in 1979 or early 1980. Unfortunately, with no identification on her, her identity would remain unknown for the next 43 years, and she became referred to as the Jane Doe 1980 case. Interestingly, they possibly had her murderer, serial killer Gerald Stano. He took responsibility for her murder and several others in the area. He was eventually sentenced to death for the murder of 17-year-old Susan Bickrest and executed on March 23, 1998, before investigators could solve the case. In 2023, the case received funding from Genealogy for Justice. DNA was extracted from a small piece of bone, and from there, FHD's genealogist helped investigators identify the woman as Pamela Kay Wittman of Martinsville, Indiana, who was 25 years old when she was murdered. From there, they were able to link her death back to Stano. Stano would typically pick up victims who were out walking because he said they were the most vulnerable. One time, though, he picked up a woman having car trouble and murdered her. In 1980, he was arrested after one of his victims escaped his hotel room after he beat her and doused her with acid. After being released for that crime, he would go on to murder somewhere between 23 and 41 women and girls, ranging in age from 12 to 34. When asked why he chose to murder, he responded that he hated rejection. A memorial marker is now where Pamela was found, reading in part, "She had the voice of an angel." Funding for the genetic genealogy research in this case was provided through the Dean and Tina Lynn Klaus Memorial Fund, which is managed by Genealogy for Justice. The Klauses were former Volusia County residents who were murdered in Texas and remained unidentified for 41 years until forensic genealogists positively identified them in 2021. Shaniya Nicole Davis was born to parents Bradley Lockhart and Antoinette Davis on June 14, 2004. Early on in life, she primarily lived with her father and his 4 other children until her mother was able to financially support her. In October of 2009, Bradley thought he was doing the right thing by letting 5-year-old Shaniya move back in with her mother, but it would turn out to be the biggest mistake of his life. Shaniya and her mother lived with her Aunt Brenda inside a mobile home in the Sleepy Hollow Mobile Home Park in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Bradley made sure to keep in touch, calling her 4 or 5 times a week. Her favorite colors were pink and yellow, and she loved playing dress-up and helping her mother and aunt with chores. She also loved to sing and wanted to join the children's choir at church, but would sadly never get the chance. On the night of November 9, 2009, Brenda received a text from her ex-boyfriend, Mario McNeil, who was at home with his girlfriend and young child, drunk and high on drugs. However, she didn't respond, so he sent a text to another woman named Taissa McLean, who lived in the same trailer park as Brenda. She did answer, and they talked for a while before inviting him over. He arrived at about 2:52 a.m., but she was already asleep. At 3:07 a.m., he tried Brenda once more, but again, there was no answer, but he decided to go to her trailer anyway. The next morning, around 6 o'clock, Antoinette entered Brenda and Jeroy's bedroom and asked if they'd seen Shaniya. They said no, and so she said she was going outside to look for her. While Antoinette was outside, another person in the home, known only as CD, told Brenda that McNeil had been there a few hours earlier. So Brenda tried to call and text him, but there was no answer. When Antoinette returned, Brenda told her to call 911, but she was initially hesitant until Brenda pleaded multiple times with her. She called at 6:52 a.m. and police arrived 10 minutes later. As for Shaniya, she was seen at a hotel entering a room with an unidentified man. An hour and a half later, they were seen again, but this time, the man was carrying her out of the hotel. Meanwhile, police were trying to locate her and questioned the family multiple times, including Antoinette. However, she maintained that she had no clue where her daughter was. An Amber Alert was quickly issued, and the hotel clerk recognized her as the girl seen with the unknown man. Investigators were eventually able to identify the man as Mario McNeil. Antoinette was interviewed again, and this time, she admitted to something horrible. On the night that McNeil made his way into the trailer, he encountered Antoinette and told her he either wanted money or sex to pay a $200 debt she owed him. She didn't offer either, and instead offered up 5-year-old Shaniya. Before McNeil even left the mobile home, he sexually assaulted her. The details of what he did to her are too horrific, but I will say that her blanket was found on the porch rail covered in feces. He then drove an hour away to a Comfort Inn and Suites in Sanford, North Carolina, and checked into room 201 at 6:24 a.m. Once inside, he assaulted her again. When he was done, he smothered her to death and dumped her body in an unknown location. A warrant was put out for his arrest, and he turned himself in 3 days later. He was then charged with first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, sexual offense of a child, indecent liberties with a child, human trafficking, and sexual servitude. By the time the trial started, they still had no clue where Shaniya's remains were. He was even asked during the trial and said they were somewhere along Route 87 between some green portable toilets. Investigators looked all over and finally found the location. After a few hours, cadaver dogs were able to locate her body stuffed under a wooden log. In the end, McNeil was convicted and sentenced to death. Antoinette was charged as well with second-degree murder, human trafficking, first-degree kidnapping, first-degree sex offense, felony child abuse with prostitution. She took a plea deal and was sentenced to 17 years in prison and will be required to register as a sex offender for at least 30 years. At this time, she is expected to be released in 2027. Tahani Mansour was born to parents Shaniya and Jamal on July 26, 1989, in Jordan, and was the youngest of 6 siblings. In 2016, 27-year-old Tahani was living with her parents in Rocky River, Ohio, and had just graduated with a Doctor of Pharmacy degree from Northeast Ohio Medical University. She had also just landed a job working as a pharmacist at the University Hospital's Ahua Medical Center in Cleveland. She was described as a positive person who had a very comforting smile. Her father, Jamal, was very wealthy and owned around 6 gas stations in Ohio. They were all very close, but because of Jamal's religious values, he was known for being extremely strict. Because of this, Tahani had to hide her relationship with a man because he was from a different religion. His obsession with control took a turn for the worse 4 years earlier in 2012 when Tahani went on a business trip to Las Vegas. Jamal unsuccessfully tried to stop her from going. Then, when she had been gone for 2 days, he felt that was way too long and began threatening to take his own life if she didn't show back up by 7 a.m. the following day. A family member, worried he would follow through with his threat, called the Rocky River Police. When they arrived, Tahani's mother, Shaniya, convinced them that Jamal wasn't a danger to himself or his family, and they took her at her word and left. 4 years later, in 2016, Tahani was once again experiencing the wrath of her father, who was progressively getting more and more upset with her. One incident was when he took a month-long trip to Jerusalem, and while gone, Tahani decided not to stay at the house. He eventually found out and was extremely upset. They were also fighting a lot about the fact that Tahani wasn't keeping her room clean. She had also been dating a non-Muslim guy for about a month, but thankfully he hadn't found out about that. Regardless, on September 27, 2016, all shit would hit the fan when Tahani returned home super late. When she walked in the door, an angry Jamal began yelling at her about her messy bedroom. Some heated words were exchanged before Tahani fled to her bedroom. At that point, Jamal felt disrespected in his own home and went and grabbed his handgun from his room. He thought to himself, and I quote, "If she doesn't respect me, then she'll respect this." When he opened Tahani's door, he found her already asleep. He approached her, pointed the gun at her head, and fired 3 shots. Once someone in the home realized what had happened, they called 911. When paramedics arrived, they found her still alive, but barely hanging on. She was rushed to the hospital and underwent emergency brain surgery, but sadly, it was unsuccessful, and she succumbed to her injuries. Jamal was arrested and initially tried to tell the police the shooting was an accident. In the end, he admitted that it was an honor killing and pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and felonious assault. He was then sentenced to 22 years in prison. Jacob Crouch was born to Gemma Barton and Andrew Smith in 2020. They had a very tumultuous relationship, and at some point, Andrew was convicted of assaulting her. When Gemma was 4 months pregnant with Jacob, she met a man on a dating app named Craig Crouch. Craig was there when Jacob was born, and Gemma listed him as the father. Andrew, on the other hand, would never see his son because poor little Jacob spent his entire life living in a horrible nightmare. On December 30th, 2020, at around 7 a.m., 39-year-old Craig called 999, which is the UK version of 911, from their home in Linton, Derbyshire, England, to report that he had found Jacob unresponsive in his bed.
Ambulance, is the patient breathing?
Hello, no, he's passed away.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
We've got a 10-month-old baby. He was struggling to eat last night. He brought up his dinner. We put him to bed. We kept checking him throughout the night. My partner checked him at 5 o'clock. She told me that he was okay. Everything was fine. I was just gone in to go and check him, and he's stone cold. He's gone.
The operator asked if anything looked physically wrong with him, but Jacob responded that he looked fine. However, when paramedics arrived, they found 10-month-old Jacob dead with bruising all over his body and signs of rigor mortis, meaning he was most likely dead before Jacob called emergency services. An autopsy found that Jacob died from an infection caused by traumatic bowel injury. The examiner also found dozens of other injuries on him. There were a total of 39 rib fractures, and the injuries most likely came from being punched, kicked, or stomped on. The examiner said that due to the amount of injuries, it looked like Jacob had been in a car crash or fallen from multiple stories. It turns out that Craig had been abusing Jacob for the past 6 months, and Gemma was aware of it. In June of that year, Couch had sent some very angry text messages to Gemma, venting his frustrations with Jacob. While Gemma called him her bundle of joy, investigators found messages between her and Craig that referred to Jacob as the devil. I'll let you decide for yourself after you listen to this.
Everything all right?
Mm-hmm.
Very quiet in there. Have you killed him?
No.
Or maybe if you had.
As human beings, we tend to follow a hierarchy. What this means is there always has to be a leader in everything that we do. Look at workplace business. You would never have 2 managers or 2 directors or 2 team leaders over the same amount of people over the same department earning the same amount of money. You just wouldn't have it. You have a chain of command. For example, there is nobody here in exactly the same job that I have over the same people over the same departments. I answer for everyone. Everyone below me answers to me. If they up, I get my kicked, and then it goes down the chain of command. This also has to stand at home. There is always a hierarchy. Anyway, I should be finished soon. I'll love you to bits. I can't wait to see you.
The worst message of all was in September when Craig sent a text to Gemma while she was bathing Jacob that read, 3 foot deep, just hot water and some bleach, XXXX.
So, Billy, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. So you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not make too many questions and put your way to line in court. And if you do so, maybe giving in evidence, okay? So your arrest is necessary for a prompt and effective investigation.
Craig, listen to what I'm about to say to you. At this time, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder of Jacob. You do not have to say anything that may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which they find in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Turn around.
In the end, Gemma was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Craig, on the other hand, was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison.